Picture this. You're on the 14th floor of a hotel in downtown Los Angeles. You turn on the shower, waiting for the water to heat up. But something's wrong. The pressure is weak, barely a trickle. The water that does come out is dark, murky, tasting strange. You call the front desk to complain. Other guests are calling too. Everyone's water is contaminated. The hotel sends a maintenance worker to investigate. He climbs to the roof, where 4 large water tanks supply the entire building. He pries open the lid of one tank and peers inside. What he sees will haunt him for the rest of his life. Floating in the water that hundreds of people have been drinking, showering in, and brushing their teeth with for nearly 3 weeks is the naked, decomposing body of a young woman. This is where the mystery ends. But where it begins is far stranger than anyone could have imagined. On January 26th, 2013, a 21-year-old Canadian student named Elisa Lam checked into the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. She was on a solo trip, traveling down the West Coast, visiting bookstores and coffee shops, updating her blog, and taking photographs of the cities she explored. Elisa was bright, articulate, and adventurous. She had a passion for literature and fashion, documenting her journey through Tumblr posts that revealed a thoughtful young woman navigating the world with curiosity and hope. She planned to stay at the Cecil for a few days before continuing her journey south to San Diego. It should have been just another stop on a young traveler's adventure. Instead, it became the setting for one of the most disturbing and widely discussed disappearances in modern times. The Cecil Hotel was not a random choice, though, in hindsight, it seems almost prophetically dark. Located on Main Street in the Skid Row area of downtown Los Angeles, the Cecil had opened in 1927 as a destination for business travelers and tourists, a glamorous 14-story building that promised comfort and elegance. But as the decades passed and the neighborhood declined, the Cecil declined with it. By the time Elisa Lam walked through its doors, the hotel had accumulated a history so dark that true crime enthusiasts knew its name by heart. It was the last place Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, was seen alive in 1947 before her body was found brutally murdered and mutilated. Serial killer Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, stayed there in the mid-1980s during his murder spree. Another serial killer, Jack Unterweger, checked in during the 90s while he was actively strangling prostitutes in the area. The hotel had witnessed numerous suicides, with people jumping from its windows or hanging themselves in its rooms. It was a place where the desperate, the transient, and the troubled converged, where rooms rented for as little as $20 a night, where the thin walls contained countless stories of addiction, mental illness, and despair. Yet despite this macabre reputation, budget travelers still booked rooms at the Cecil, now partially rebranded as Stay on Main, drawn by the low prices and central location. Elisa Lam was one of them. She checked into a shared hostel room on the 5th floor, planning to meet fellow travelers and explore the city. Everything seemed normal at first. She posted on social media about her trip. She visited the Last Bookstore, a beloved independent bookstore in downtown Los Angeles, purchasing gifts for her family. She seemed to be enjoying her adventure, just as she had in San Diego and San Francisco before arriving in Los Angeles. But then, on January 31st, Elisa failed to check out of the hotel as scheduled. The day passed, then another. Her parents in Vancouver, who had been in regular contact with their daughter throughout her trip, became alarmed when she stopped answering her phone. Elisa called them every single day. Her silence was completely out of character. On February 1st, they contacted the Los Angeles Police Department to report their daughter missing. The LAPD began their investigation immediately, treating it as a missing persons case. Officers searched Elisa's room but found her belongings still there, including her laptop, phone, and personal items. This was troubling. A person doesn't leave for a voluntary trip without these essentials, especially someone who had been actively documenting their journey online. Police interviewed hotel staff and guests. They reviewed the Cecil's security footage, tracking Elisa's movements through the building. And then they found something that would soon captivate millions of people around the world and spawn countless theories, debates, and investigations. The elevator video. The footage was time-stamped for February 1st, the day Elisa was supposed to check out. In grainy black and white, the interior of an elevator is visible. The doors are open. Then Elisa enters the frame, stepping into the elevator with her characteristic long, dark hair and wearing a red hoodie. What happens next over the course of the next 3 to 4 minutes is deeply unsettling. She presses multiple buttons on the elevator panel, seemingly every button, then steps back into the corner. The elevator doors don't close. She waits, then peeks her head out, looking left then right down the hallway, as if checking to see if someone is there. She steps partially out of the elevator, then back in. She presses the buttons again. Still, the doors remain open. Then her behavior becomes increasingly erratic. She steps out into the hallway, moving to the side of the elevator, pressing herself against the wall as if hiding. She appears to be talking, though there's no audio, her hands gesturing animatedly as if in conversation with someone unseen. She steps back into the elevator, moves to different corners, her body language suggesting agitation or fear. At one point, she makes strange hand gestures, her fingers contorting in unusual ways, waving her arms. She jumps slightly, as if startled. Then she steps out of the elevator one final time and disappears from view. Seconds later, the elevator doors finally close, and it begins to operate normally, stopping at different floors, as if responding to the buttons she had pressed minutes earlier. The Los Angeles Police Department released this footage to the public on February 14th, hoping someone might have information about Elisa's whereabouts or what had happened to her. They could not have anticipated what would follow. The video went viral almost instantly, spreading across YouTube, Reddit, and every social media platform, accumulating millions of views within days. People became obsessed with the footage, analyzing every frame, every gesture, every strange movement. Internet sleuths emerged from every corner of the web, each with their own theory about what was happening in those 4 minutes. The speculation ranged from the plausible to the outlandish, from the scientific to the supernatural. Some viewers believed Elisa was playing a game, possibly an elevator ritual that had originated from Korean urban legends, where pushing certain button combinations was said to transport you to another dimension. Others thought she was hiding from someone, that a predator was stalking her through the hotel, and her behavior was pure fear. The way she pressed against the wall, the way she kept checking the hallway, suggested she was trying to escape someone or something. Some pointed to her hand gestures and unusual movements as evidence of a psychotic break or drug-induced hallucination, noting that her behavior seemed disconnected from reality. Then there were those who believed something paranormal was at work. The Cecil Hotel's dark history made it easy for supernatural theories to take root. Was Elisa possessed? Was she being haunted? Some claimed to see shadows in the footage, dark figures lurking just out of frame. The fact that the elevator doors wouldn't close became a focal point of these theories. Was some unseen force holding them open? The internet investigation grew more frenzied with each passing day. Amateur detectives combed through Elisa's Tumblr blog, analyzing her posts for hidden meanings. They noted that she had written about depression, that she had quoted dark poetry, that some of her posts suggested emotional turmoil. They found a video she had posted on YouTube where she talked about dealing with depression and bipolar disorder, where she discussed the struggles of managing mental health. This information added new dimensions to the theories. Was her behavior in the elevator the result of a mental health crisis? Had she stopped taking medication? But others argued that her online presence showed someone thoughtful and self-aware, not someone spiraling toward a tragic end. The discussions became heated, with people on Reddit, web sleuths forums, and 4chan arguing passionately about what had really happened to Elisa Lam. Conspiracy theories multiplied. Some noticed that there was a tuberculosis outbreak at Skid Row right around the time of Elisa's disappearance, and the test for tuberculosis was called Lam Elisa. This coincidence seemed too strange to ignore. Was there a connection? Was something more sinister at play involving biological testing? Others connected the case to the horror movie Dark Water, where a girl's body is found in a water tank on a hotel roof, noting the eerie similarities. The theories grew increasingly elaborate, incorporating everything from government cover-ups to ritual sacrifices. The case became a phenomenon, a mystery that captivated people because there seemed to be no rational explanation for what they were seeing in that elevator footage. Meanwhile, the search for Elisa continued. Police brought in search dogs and conducted extensive searches of the hotel and surrounding area. They checked hospitals, shelters, and jails. They interviewed hundreds of people, but there was no trace of her. The Cecil Hotel itself became part of the investigation. The building was enormous, with 600 rooms spread across 14 floors, long corridors, fire escapes, a basement, and a roof that was supposedly locked and inaccessible to guests. Police searched the roof early in the investigation, but found nothing unusual. The water tanks were up there, large industrial containers that held the hotel's water supply, but officers conducting the initial search didn't look inside them. The tanks had heavy lids that required significant effort to open, and there was no reason to suspect someone would or could be inside. As the days stretched into weeks, hope of finding Elisa alive began to fade. Her parents flew to Los Angeles, distributing flyers, appearing on local news, pleading for information. The LAPD held press conferences. The Chinese consulate got involved as the case was receiving international attention. But still, there were no solid leads. Elisa Lam seemed to have vanished into thin air. The elevator video continued to haunt everyone who watched it. What was she doing? Who was she afraid of? Where did she go after she stepped out of that elevator? These questions consumed investigators and internet sleuths alike. Then, on February 19th, 19 days after Elisa was last seen, came the horrifying discovery. Guests at the Cecil had been complaining about the water for days. It was dark. It tasted strange. The pressure was terrible. Some guests had even checked out because of the water problems, complaining to the staff about the awful conditions. Finally, the hotel sent maintenance worker Santiago Lopez to the roof to check the water tanks. There were 4 large cisterns up there, each holding 1,000 gallons. Lopez climbed the ladder to the platform and approached the tanks. He opened the lid of one and shined his flashlight inside. The water looked dark. He opened the lid wider and looked more carefully. That's when he saw her. Elisa Lam's body floating face up in the water, naked except for her underwear, her skin already decomposing from nearly 3 weeks in the water. The police were called immediately. The scene was secured and a major investigation began. The fire department was brought in to help drain the water tank. It took several hours to remove enough water to recover Elisa's body. As they worked, the horrifying reality set in. Guests at the hotel had been drinking, bathing in, and brushing their teeth with water that had been contaminated by a decomposing corpse for weeks. Some guests reported feeling ill. Others were traumatized by the revelation. The hotel was immediately evacuated and the water system was shut down. This was now not just a missing persons case, but a death investigation with deeply disturbing circumstances. The autopsy was conducted by the Los Angeles County Department of Medical Examiner Coroner. The initial examination found no signs of trauma to Elisa's body. There were no broken bones, no signs of assault, no defensive wounds. Toxicology reports were ordered, which would take several weeks to complete. The coroner's office reviewed all the evidence. the location of the body, the condition of the remains, the scene on the roof, and the circumstances of her disappearance. The question everyone wanted answered was simple but profound. How did Elisa Lam end up in that water tank? The roof access was supposedly locked and secured, accessible only to hotel staff. To reach the water tanks, someone would need to get through a locked door with an alarm, climb a fire escape, and then scale another ladder to the platform where the tanks sat. The tanks themselves were heavy industrial containers with lids that weighed between 20 and 30 pounds. The opening was relatively small. Getting inside would require significant effort and determination. There was a ladder attached to each tank, but climbing it while opening the heavy lid would be challenging. And once inside, it would be nearly impossible to close the lid from within. Yet when Elisa's body was found, the lid was closed, though not latched. Investigators examined every possibility. Could someone have forced Elisa onto the roof and into the tank? But there was no evidence of anyone else being involved. Security footage showed no one following her. There were no signs of struggle. Her body bore no marks of assault. Could she have been meeting someone on the roof? But who and why? There were no suspects, no persons of interest, no one who had any apparent connection to Elisa who could explain what happened. The investigation kept coming back to the same uncomfortable conclusion. Elisa had somehow gotten onto the roof by herself and climbed into that water tank of her own volition. But why would anyone do such a thing? This is where the case becomes heartbreaking rather than mysterious. When the toxicology reports came back weeks later, they revealed important information. Elisa had prescription medications in her system, but the levels were lower than they should have been if she had been taking her medication as prescribed. She had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and depression, and had been prescribed several medications, including antidepressants and mood stabilizers. The combination of medications she was prescribed was specifically designed to manage serious mental health conditions. But the toxicology showed she hadn't been taking them consistently or at all in the days before her death. The coroner ruled Elisa's death an accidental drowning, with bipolar disorder listed as a significant contributing factor. The official determination was that Elisa, in a state of mental health crisis, had found her way to the roof, possibly through a window, a fire escape, or a door that wasn't properly secured, and climbed into the water tank, where she drowned. The medical examiner's report suggested that during a manic or psychotic episode, her behavior could become erratic and her judgment severely impaired. The strange movements in the elevator, the paranoid checking of the hallway, the unusual hand gestures, these were all consistent with someone experiencing a mental health crisis. This explanation didn't satisfy everyone. How could a small woman in the middle of a psychotic episode manage to navigate the complex route to the roof, climb the ladder, open a heavy tank lid, climb inside, and then somehow close it behind her? The physics seemed implausible. Some investigators and outside experts suggested that during a manic episode, people can exhibit unusual strength and determination, that they can accomplish physical feats that seem impossible in their normal state. The closure of the lid remained the biggest point of contention, but it was noted that the lid was not latched, suggesting it may have simply fallen back into place by gravity or been partially moved by Elisa as she climbed in, not fully closing, but settling enough to appear closed from a distance. The truth about what happened to Elisa Lam is both simpler and more tragic than any of the elaborate theories suggested. She was a young woman struggling with serious mental illness, traveling alone, far from her support system, who stopped taking her medication. Bipolar disorder is a serious condition that can cause dramatic shifts in mood, behavior, and perception. During manic episodes, people can experience delusions, hallucinations, impaired judgment, and dangerous behavior. They might feel invincible, lose touch with reality, or experience overwhelming paranoia. The elevator footage, when viewed through this lens, shows not evidence of the supernatural or a crime, but a young woman in the grip of a mental health crisis, possibly experiencing hallucinations, possibly fleeing from perceived threats that existed only in her mind. The Cecil Hotel's reputation added fuel to the conspiracy theories, but it was ultimately irrelevant to what happened. Yes, the hotel had a dark history. Yes, it was located in a troubled neighborhood. But Elisa Lam didn't die because the hotel was cursed or haunted or the site of some sinister plot. She died because she was sick, and her illness, combined with circumstances that allowed her to access the roof, led to a tragic accident. The hotel's security measures were called into question after her death. How was it possible for a guest to reach the roof? Why were the water tanks not more secured? Why did it take so long for anyone to check them when she was reported missing? These were legitimate questions that the hotel and the police had to answer. In the aftermath, the Cecil Hotel faced numerous lawsuits from Elisa's family and from guests who had been exposed to the contaminated water. The hotel's reputation, already poor, became toxic in the wake of the case. It changed ownership and attempted rebrandings, but the Elisa Lam case had become its defining characteristic. The building that had once been a glamorous destination had become synonymous with death and mystery. In 2020, the hotel closed its doors, ostensibly for renovations, but as of this writing, it remains closed to the public, its future uncertain. For Elisa's family, the truth offered little comfort. They lost their daughter to a disease that is still stigmatized, still misunderstood, still inadequately treated in many cases. In statements released through their lawyer, they expressed frustration with the conspiracy theories and sensationalism surrounding Elisa's death. She wasn't a character in a horror story or a mystery to be solved by armchair detectives. She was their daughter, their sister, a real person who struggled with mental illness and whose life was cut tragically short. They asked for privacy and for people to remember Elisa for who she was, a kind, intelligent, creative young woman who loved literature and fashion and life, who was more than the final moments captured on that elevator video. The case of Elisa Lam forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about how we consume tragedy. The internet's obsession with the elevator footage turned a young woman's mental health crisis into entertainment. Millions of people watched her paranoid, confused behavior and spun elaborate theories, treating her death as a puzzle to be solved rather than a human tragedy to be mourned. The case went viral not because people cared about Elisa Lam as a person, but because the mystery was intriguing, the footage was creepy, and the theories were endlessly fascinating. In the process, the actual Elisa, her struggles, her humanity, her family's grief, became secondary to the narrative people wanted to construct. This phenomenon speaks to a broader issue in true crime culture. We're drawn to mysteries, to the inexplicable, to stories that don't have easy answers. But in our search for entertainment and intrigue, we sometimes forget that these are real people with real families who are left to pick up the pieces. The internet detectives who spent hours analyzing the elevator footage, who developed elaborate theories about government conspiracies or supernatural forces, were not helping to find Elisa. They were creating noise, spreading misinformation, and in some cases, causing additional pain to her family by treating her death as a game. The stigma surrounding mental illness played a significant role in how the case was perceived. Many people found it easier to believe in conspiracies, hauntings, or foul play than to accept that mental illness alone could explain what happened. This resistance to acknowledging the reality of severe mental health conditions is part of why these conditions remain so dangerous. Bipolar disorder, when properly treated with medication and therapy, can be managed. Many people with bipolar disorder live full, productive lives, but it requires consistent treatment, strong support systems, and understanding from society. When someone stops taking their medication or loses access to treatment, the consequences can be severe, even fatal. Elisa's Tumblr posts, when read with compassion rather than scrutiny, reveal a young woman who was deeply aware of her struggles. She wrote openly about depression, about the challenges of managing mental health, about feeling alone. She shared quotes about darkness and pain alongside posts about fashion and books and hope. She was complex, as all people are, navigating the world with both her illness and her intelligence. The tragedy is that she was trying, she was fighting, and ultimately she was overwhelmed by an illness that is still not adequately understood or treated by our medical system. The elevator footage, viewed from this perspective, becomes almost unbearably sad. Those aren't the movements of someone playing a game or being chased by a killer. They're the movements of someone who is lost, confused, frightened by things that aren't there, trapped in a reality that has become distorted by illness. She's pressing elevator buttons that don't work because her brain is telling her something is wrong with the elevator. She's hiding and checking the hallway because she perceives a threat. She's making strange gestures because she's experiencing thoughts and perceptions that are disconnected from reality. And through it all, she's alone, with no one to help her, to ground her, to take her to safety. Within hours of that footage, she would make her way to the roof and into that water tank, and no one would know until it was far too late. The questions that remain are not about what happened, but about what could have been done differently. Could the hotel staff have noticed her distress? Could the security systems have prevented her from accessing the roof? Could mental health services have intervened? These are the questions worth asking, because they might actually prevent future tragedies. The case of Elisa Lam should prompt conversations about how we support people traveling alone with mental health conditions, about how hotels can better protect vulnerable guests, about how we can destigmatize mental illness so that people feel comfortable asking for help. In the years since Elisa's death, the elevator video continues to circulate online. New generations of internet users discover it and restart the same cycles of speculation and theory. Netflix released a documentary series about the case that brought renewed attention and controversy. Some felt the series exploited Elisa's death for entertainment value while claiming to honor her memory. Others appreciated that it attempted to provide context about mental illness and to push back against the more outlandish conspiracy theories. The debate continues, as does the fascination with the case. What we should remember is this. Elisa Lam was 21 years old when she died. She loved books and fashion and adventure. She had dreams and fears and struggles like everyone else. She was someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's friend. Her death was not a mystery designed to entertain us. It was a tragedy that highlights the devastating impact of untreated mental illness. The water was dark because a young woman who deserved better drowned in it, alone and scared, far from home. That's the story. That's the truth that matters more than any conspiracy theory or supernatural explanation. The real horror of the Elisa Lam case is not found in haunted hotels or sinister plots. It's found in the fact that mental illness is still so misunderstood and stigmatized that even in death, a young woman's struggle is transformed into entertainment rather than treated with the compassion it deserves. It's found in the systems that failed to protect someone who was vulnerable. It's found in a society that would rather believe in elaborate conspiracies than face the uncomfortable reality that serious mental health conditions can have fatal consequences. If there's anything to learn from Elisa Lam's story, it's that we need to do better. We need better mental health support systems, better awareness and education about conditions like bipolar disorder, better safety measures in public spaces, and most importantly, better compassion for those who are struggling. We need to see people in crisis and ask how we can help, not how we can turn their suffering into a viral video or a topic of morbid fascination. The Cecil Hotel still stands on Main Street in downtown Los Angeles, though its doors remain closed. The building is a monument now, not to the glamour it once promised, but to all the tragedies that occurred within its walls. Elisa Lam's name will forever be associated with that building, but she deserves to be remembered for more than where she died. She deserves to be remembered as she lived, as a young woman full of potential, navigating the challenges of mental illness with courage, whose life was cut short not by mystery or malice, but by the cruel reality of a disease that still claims too many lives. The water was dark because it held death, but the darkness we should really be concerned with is the one that surrounds mental illness. The stigma and misunderstanding that prevents people from getting help, that turns tragedy into spectacle, that allows young people to suffer alone. That's the darkness worth fighting against. That's the mystery worth solving. And perhaps, if we can shed light on that darkness, tragedies like Elisa Lam's might become less common, and young people struggling with mental illness might find the help and support they need before it's too late. That would be the best way to honor her memory, not by endlessly analyzing elevator footage or developing new theories, but by working toward a world where what happened to her becomes impossible.